You're listening to the Intercoastal Podcast, part of the Destination Marketing Podcast Network. Welcome to the Intercoastal Podcast, where we share the stories, heritage, and hidden gems that make the Lowcountry unforgettable. This is a place to find your Intercoastal. I'm Daquan Mickens, and today we're diving deep into the history with someone who knows it better than anyone else, Richard Thomas, the chairman of Beaufort County's 250. We'll be exploring Beaufort's role in the years leading up to the American Revolution, the people who shaped it, and how those moments still echo in our community today. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Daquan. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you, glad to kind of dive into the history. Anytime we dive into the history, I learn something new out every time. So to start us off, can you tell us what first drew you to Beaufort's revolutionary history?
Well, I think the fact that pretty much I was raised in the North, and when I came down here almost 30 years ago, I really didn't know that anything had occurred south of Virginia.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite that ignorant, but fairly close.
Yeah.
But then just all of a sudden catching on to the depth and richness of history that Beaufort County has just took me away. I've always been a history buff. So yeah, I've studied it pretty intensively over the last 20 years.
Yeah. And I wouldn't call myself a history buff, but all my friends were history majors in college. So I was a history buff by association. I would go over their house and they would just have the History Channel on. And by sitting there, I would learn new things constantly. So it kind of made myself interested in history and love to learn new things about history. But for the listeners who might not know, what made Beaufort such a significant place in the years before the Revolution?
Well, a lot of things I think would contribute to that, Daquan. I mean, first of all, you don't think of it in today's terms, but Beaufort was either the second or the third largest city in South Carolina at the time, depending on how you count that. It was also one of two ports, three ports actually, if you count Georgetown. And those ports were the center of commerce for the state. Charleston controlled by far the greatest portion of that, but Beaufort was still a strategically significant location for a port as viewed by all the European powers up until that time, and that had been the way it was for 200 years prior to the Revolution. I think it's because Beaufort had a role in helping to block British control of the mainland territory between Savannah and Charleston, and a very significant role.
Yeah.
I mean, they ranged far and wide. They were incredibly resilient. They were determined. Although there was stiff British opposition and incredible loyalist presence in this area, the Patriots in Beaufort District, time and time again, challenged the British strength and the British domination over this part of the world. I mean, other than two brief occupations, the town of Beaufort was pretty much in Patriot hands during the war years.
Yeah.
When we have focused on it, we kind of ask ourselves, what is the essence of Beaufort District during the Revolutionary period? We've kind of honed in on a theme, and we call it Harbor of Defiance.
Yeah.
That Beaufort District was a harbor of defiance to British attempts to control the mainland area between Savannah and Charleston.
Yeah.
So that made it pretty special, small but powerful.
Yeah, and important, like you said, in controlling the mainland and kind of cutting off the ties of them, kind of undercutting them in a sense.
Yep.
So what was life like in Beaufort during the mid to late 1700s, both for wealthy planters and ordinary townspeople?
It's interesting. Beaufort was in the midst of undergoing a slow but steady transformation. I think a lot of that was prompted by the occasion of the Revolution. So you had effectively 50 years of prosperity and growth that was associated with essentially the area south of the Columbia River. The southern parishes were the ones that were to the south of the Edisto River. Edisto had started to be pretty well settled, and the territory in between Edisto and Columbia were well established, but further to the south was not. Beaufort took the lead in that, obviously, starting in the early 1700s. But up to 1750, it was pretty much the commercial center of indigo farming on the southern Sea Islands in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And that made it obviously a pretty significant and important location. So Beaufort had come from a position really in the early 1700s of being a lawless frontier town, a haven for pirates, brigands of any sort kind of found favor in Beaufort and in Charleston, as a matter of fact. Some of that started to go away when Savannah became a major port, took a little bit of the traffic away from Beaufort. And Beaufort's pursuits then started to turn more to the social graces in keeping with the increasing prosperity of the planters that lived in the area. During the Revolution, all of the security that had developed in those decades between 1711 and 1750 started to really decline. And during the war, the residents were subject to really the whims of the British occupiers or the British raiders. They could come in. They had rights by the acts that had been passed in 1774 to take possession of somebody's house and just establish that as a residence if they wanted to. So they were under the thumb of oppression in various sorts while the British were present in residing or resident in the area. But as soon as the Patriots would force the British out again, life would return somewhat to normal, although again, steady decline. With the war comes the crash of the indigo market. And with the crash of the indigo market, the source of wealth for most of the planters. I mean, there was some rice farming. A lot of the indigo farmers also had rice plantations on the dry swamps inland where they would farm the rice. It was kind of a symbiotic relationship, actually, because those planters could shift staff. They could shift workers from the inland plantations to the sea islands in keeping with the cutting seasons for indigo. And one of the things about Beaufort and the southern sea islands was that some of the planters were able to enjoy 3 cuttings of indigo a year, making it even more profitable for them to accumulate this fabulous wealth. Well, crash of the market happens. Obviously, Britain stops buying our goods. That was the target of most of our exports at the time. And when that happens at the end of the war, there's basically a period of lawlessness. That period of lawlessness will last for about 5 years, from 1785 until 1790, when the first planting of Sea Island cotton occurs over on Hilton Head. And then it's off to the races between then and the beginning of the Civil War. So, but Beaufort also was undergoing a social transformation in that the attention was less to the decadent practices of the lawless years and more toward piousness, intellectual pursuits. Beaufort became known as a haven for intellectual pursuits in the early 1800s. So it was quite a change from a century before.
I did not know that. That's definitely interesting. And all the way from indigo growing and the rice plantations that were out here to that transformation. And I didn't know about the intellectual properties as far as being known for that during that time. So the Battle of Port Royal Sound in 1779 is often mentioned in local history. Can you walk us through what happened and why it mattered?
Absolutely. I mean, the Battle of Port Royal Sound, it's actually funny. I mean, that was a Civil War conflict. The battle that occurs in 1779 in Beaufort was called the Battle of Beaufort, the Battle of Gray's Hill, and better known and more appropriately known as the Battle of Port Royal Island. It was the first British attempt to control Beaufort, to take it out of the hands of the rebels so they could use it for their strategic purposes, right? What will happen is that shortly after Savannah is captured by the British in December of 1778, the commander was a colonel named Archibald Campbell, and Archibald Campbell decides that he's going to start probing into the surrounding territory and start to expand the beachhead that they've established. So they'll send some waterborne troops into what is today Beaufort County, and they will raid various properties they find along pretty much deep water frontage. And that would be on Daquan Island, on Hilton Head Island, Pinckney Island, and then upriver on the Broad River before crossing Port Royal Sound. So at the end of January in 1779, Campbell will send about 200 British regulars as well as some cavalry and some militia troops from Daquan and from Georgia on a barge, what they called a barge, but it was really a demasted schooner. And that schooner was rowed by 2 long oar boats of men rowing this ship without masts along the Intracoastal Waterway. Today is the Intracoastal Waterway. And they'll make the raids on Hilton Head and Pinckney. Then they will turn to the north, go up the Broad River to where Thomas Hayward Jr.'s home was.
Oh, wow.
And, of course, that was a target.
I
mean, Whitehall Plantation was his home. His birthplace, Old House Plantation, was across the Uau Creek. And basically, they will raid Hayward's plantation and destroy it and burn it to the ground. They'll then turn toward Port Royal Island, and they go across to Laurel Bay. Laurel Bay was their targeted landing point in this campaign to try to control, take possession of Beaufort. And they'll be off Laurel Bay. They'll be near the border of the plantation that was owned by General Stephen Bull of Beaufort District Militia and a man named Andrew DeVoe. Andrew DeVoe had started the war as a patriot, but then converted to being a loyalist, changed coat, and was now a loyalist, a leading loyalist. So they'll be off that land, and they'll bombard Bull's house to force out the patriots that were kind of fortified in the house.
Mm-hmm.
The patriots will leave, the British land, they go in, they occupy Bull's house, they take all the silver, they take 120 cases of ale and wine, which is obviously a prize that they wanted dramatically.
Yes.
And then they'll camp there that night. The following morning, they'll raid some more properties in the area, steal all their silver, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll turn their attentions toward Beaufort, and they'll send a small detachment of men to the north to go up to where the Port Royal Ferry was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to control that crossing point so that reinforcements can't come onto Port Royal Island from the mainland and come on their backs, basically, as they attack Beaufort. And then they'll turn to the south, and they're along the main road, the ferry road, which today is Route 21, and at a place called Gray's Hill, where there's a slight rise in the elevation. Somebody told me that, in fact, it is Beaufort County's highest elevation.
Oh, wow.
At 36 feet
Yeah, I
above
didn't
sea
know
level.
that.
But at this place called Gray's Hill, they will meet the patriots who have now come north from the town of Beaufort, the defenses of the town, and have set up a defensive line along the crest of that hill.
Mm-hmm.
A battle will rage for about 45 minutes. Both sides, you have 200 British against 300 patriots.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides will start to run out of ammunition. The American commander, General William Moultrie, will be starting to order a withdrawal at the same time that all of a sudden the British turn and go back to Laurel Bay to get to the ship. So they leave the field. It is technically declared a Patriot victory, and it's a significant one because it's the first land-based victory in the war in South Carolina where the Patriots defeat British regulars.
Oh, wow.
The first battle where Patriots defeat British regulars is at the Battle of Sullivan's Island on June 28th, the previous summer. Actually, a couple summers earlier in 1776, and that today we celebrate as Carolina Day.
Oh, nice.
So,
yeah,
long-winded answer, but
no, you're good.
That's what happened.
That's definitely good information to show, how important it was to stand strong on the island, because if the British would have had that location, they could have controlled a lot more, and who knows where the war could have went, the Revolutionary War.
I mean, I forget what the number is, but I know Beaufort County is like 70% water or some incredible figure like that. And if you think about the British stronghold in Savannah, and they are trying to capture Charleston, if they could have had Beaufort, all of a sudden now they have a beachhead that's a mainland from which they can approach. Because crossing the Savannah River wasn't easy for a large army at the time. Anyway, it was a very important target for them, and it played a significant role in the war.
Yeah. I agree. Were there particular individuals from Beaufort whose actions before or during the war had a lasting impact?
There were many. I mean, it depends when you want to say what's before the war, but normally people would think of July 4th, 1776, Declaration of Independence. Well, there were a couple of events that occurred actually in 1775 and in early 1776 in which the men of the Beaufort District Militia were the primary players in these actions against the British. And the first one was in July of 1775. It was called the Philippa Affair, or the Battle of Bloody Point. And it was essentially the seizure of 16,000 pounds of gunpowder from a British vessel that was bringing it to Savannah and then down to St. Augustine for use by the Indian allies of the British. Well, the men who intervened in that were Stephen Bull, who was at that time the colonel of the Beaufort District Militia, and he was ordered by William Drayton, who was the president of something called the Secret Committee of the Council of Safety of the colony of South Carolina. And he ordered Bull to intercept British ships that would be coming into Beaufort District waters, carrying these loads of munitions. Well, the first one was sighted on July 8th. It came into Beaufort District waters. We had two patrol boat commanders under the command of General Bull, John Joyner and Barnwell. And they took their scout boats down to the tip of Daquan Island. The royal governor of Georgia had been accepting the British shipments And so the assembly in Georgia was then Patriot dominated. So they drove the governor out of town, along with some of the other members of the assembly who were loyalists, and opened the way for Georgia to now commit a schooner. So basically the first ship of the Georgia Navy. And that ship was named Elizabeth, but they changed her name to Liberty.
Yeah.
And so the Liberty and the 2 scout boats from Beaufort District, who were manned by Beaufort District militiamen, were the ones that interdicted the shipment of goods on board the Philippa and basically ended up sending gunpowder up to George Washington for the siege of Boston. Big event. The second one occurs, and that was so Stephen Bull and John Joyner and Edward Barnwell. You also had a lot of privateers that were active during that period of time. Probably the most notorious one in Beaufort District was a guy named John Stoney, operating out of Hilton Head, and he was especially effective in evading British patrols and disrupting shipping and all that. You had Thomas Hayward Jr., of course, Jasper County today, but part of Beaufort District at the time, signer of the Declaration, fought in the Battle of Port Royal.
Yeah.
Moultrie was not Beaufort County, but he certainly was here quite a bit of his time in Beaufort District, and he was a major figure, obviously, in the Patriot defenses of the area. On the Tory side, Andrew DeVoe was probably one of the leading. There was also a man from Georgia named Thomas Brown, who spent a lot of his, bloody Thomas Brown, right? Spent a lot of his time here in Beaufort District. And then you had Richard Pendarvis of what is today Palmetto Bluff, Philip Martin Angel from what is today Defusky Island. And they were the 4 most powerful, influential, and active loyalist leaders in Beaufort District.
Yeah.
Then during the war years, you have a few other people that come in there. I mean, it's a long, wonderful story. We can add them in. But one of the neat things about this, Daquan, is that even to this day, there are so many direct descendants of these notable Patriot figures that figured prominently in the outcome of the war in Beaufort District and in the colonies in general. So
yeah. I was going to say, you don't realize how important a small little area is. But at that time when there weren't a ton of different developed towns and right with the waterfront, it plays such a pivotal point in revolutionary times and
definitely
in the war. It's definitely an important aspect of the war.
Yep.
We often hear about tensions between loyalists and patriots in other colonies. Was that division present here in Beaufort as well? I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but how divided was just the Beaufort?
Yeah, it was every bit as present, and it was present in a different way and probably in a more powerful way. I think about in families. I mean, when you think about the Civil War, you think about brothers against brothers, fathers against sons, families splitting up because of that.
Yep.
Same thing was true during the Revolution. Notably, you had the Bull family, so father of the family, and the Hayward family, Daniel Hayward. They were both more kind of loyalist leaning, whereas their sons, who became major leaders in the Revolution, were patriots, and that estranged them during that period of time. And in Hayward's case, that was for the end of time because his father died before they could reconcile. But it was different in the sense that in Beaufort District and in the Lowcountry of South Carolina, for the main part, the Patriots were fighting against organized loyalist groups. In the northern colonies, the loyalists were kind of active in small, subversive, secret kind of groups that caused chaos in places. Here, you had huge loyalist regiments that were fighting against Patriot units. So I would say that it was every bit as impactful as it was in the North, and probably more so because of that fact. The organization of the forces, both for oppression and for resistance against oppression. So
And then how much? Well, this isn't a question. This is just me wondering how much, like in the open, were these organizations? I know, like we said, up north, the loyalists had to be quiet and they had to keep it on the hush. How open? And I know the Beaufort community as a whole and the history of Beaufort, it's loud and proud. So how open were they during that time?
They were pretty open. I mean, what I mentioned earlier is that there was always a very strong and staunch loyalist presence in Beaufort District.
Yeah.
The town of Beaufort had what they called at the time kind of a Tory reputation. So leaning a little bit on the Tory side, but not so much that there wasn't a strong Patriot force in
Yeah.
Beaufort. So it was wide open. You had just the way you had Beaufort District militia commanders who were prominent citizens and major figures in the war. You had Loyalist regimental commanders. Andrew DeVoe probably being one of the most prominent, and he ended up as major of a Royal militia unit called the Royal Foresters, which was militiamen from Loyalist militia from Beaufort District and into Colleton County, Colleton County today. And then you had a guy named Edward Fenwick. Fenwick was more up in the Colleton area, but he also commanded forces down in the Beaufort District a lot. And a couple of the major confrontations between Patriots and Loyalists that occurred in Beaufort District were with Fenwick's unit, with Bloody Thomas Brown's unit from Georgia. So you had a lot of that going on too. And that went both ways. I mean, the Patriot militia were very far-ranging. They weren't just confined to actions in Beaufort District. I mean, they fought in East Florida. They fought up as far as Charleston, just north of Charleston, and Ranger units from Beaufort District roamed the interior around Orangeburg and, places like that, and up to Camden. They were part of the Battle of Camden. So, they were all over the place.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was just interested
Sure.
in finding that out. So what kind of everyday risk or sacrifices would Beaufort residents have faced during this period of unrest?
Confiscation of property, confiscation of residence.
Yeah.
Just that oppressive presence of British when British were here in power. But they didn't stay in power for long. That's one of the things about Beaufort was it was very resilient. There was no steady state of affairs for very long during that Revolutionary period.
Yeah. So they were able to move quickly on from the British and not have to worry as much.
Yeah, and most of the time it was due to Patriot resistance. But once with the people that Prevost left here in Beaufort to occupy the town in the first occupation of Beaufort, he left 900 men in a garrison here in Beaufort. They were withdrawn from Beaufort because of the siege in Savannah, where the Patriots surrounded Savannah and tried to force Prevost to surrender. So they were withdrawn and taken back to Savannah. So that ended the occupation of Beaufort. The other times it was the Patriots that forced them out, literally with street-to-street fighting. You think of Fallujah, things like that. Well, you have the Patriot sharpshooters who infiltrate Beaufort town and are picking off British soldiers and officers and things like that. And so that's weakening British resistance, ultimately forcing them to abandon the town.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to visit Beaufort today and trace its revolutionary history, what sites and landmarks would you recommend they see first?
Probably, first and foremost, I would say Old Sheldon Church. It was the site of Prince William Parish Church. It was built in the 1750s by William Bull Sr., and he was one who had helped found the colony of Georgia with Oglethorpe. It ended up being the muster point for the Beaufort District Militia north of the Broad in those days, and was also the place where the gunpowder that was stolen from the Philippa was stored before it was shipped up to General Washington that winter. But Old Sheldon Church had a big part in the Revolution. I would definitely have people go to Grays Hill, go to the battlefield site at Grays Hill.
Yeah.
Not a lot to see. There's only one interpretive sign. Beaufort County 250 Committee plans to change that in time for the 250th anniversary of the battle, which is February 3rd of 2029. But that would be a must-stop.
Yeah.
I would say St. Helena Church and Churchyard.
Yeah.
One of the oldest churches in the colonies, 1727, I think it was built. And it also is the site of a cemetery containing 14 Patriot grave sites, which makes it the largest single collection of Patriot grave sites in the whole coastal region of South Carolina outside the city of Charleston.
Okay.
And there are also 2 British officers that were buried there. It's kind of neat. Fort Frederick, Fort Prince Frederick, although it really didn't figure in the Revolution per se.
Yeah.
It was a British garrison up until the 1750s and was manned by Patriot garrisons after that during the war period, but never the site of action.
Okay.
Fort Littleton's on private property. You can't really see that.
Yeah.
On Hilton Head, you have the Zion Chapel of East Cemetery, which is a Revolutionary era cemetery with 4 Patriot grave sites there. Stony Baynard Ruins. On Defusky of the Hague Plantation ruins, and that was a pre-revolutionary plantation site.
Mm-hmm.
And then over in Palmetto Bluff, and this is Beaufort County today.
Yeah.
You go to Jasper, you've got Thomas Hayward's tomb,
Mm-hmm.
you have Purriesburg, and then also the Battle of Coosawhatchee, which is starting to be developed into a proper site for visitation. So those are really the 10 Megillas that you would want to visit.
Yeah, and that's a perfect starting point if you wanted to, before expanding even further out to the, like you said, to Jasper County and the surrounding areas of Beaufort. Do you think these stories of Beaufort's revolutionary past still shape Beaufort's community and identity today?
Whether the story shaped the community identity or not, I'm not positive, but I know that the people do, the families.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so many,
Mm-hmm.
as I mentioned earlier, of the notable patriot participants in the revolution still have living direct descendants here in Beaufort, and there are many.
Yeah.
And some of the stories are fascinating. I mean, you got people like this. The one guy I just came across recently is William Hazard Wigg.
Mm-hmm.
And William Hazard Wigg was a hero, a legend in his own time amongst the people in the district. Anyway, it goes on and on, Daquan. I mean, fills the stuff of many books. And anyway,
I was going to say,
wonderful stories.
Just hearing how many people came out from this time period in Beaufort and how impactful Beaufort was, it kind of shows the importance of the people who lived here, and they're, like you said, their descendants who still live here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the stories do affect it because it shapes the historical consciousness of Beaufort.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Beaufort's history is such a prized possession of Beaufortonians.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And as we approach the 250th anniversary of America's independence, what lessons from Beaufort's history do you think are most relevant for us now?
That's a tough one. You know what? I think it is. I think it is that oppression will always bring resistance. And something about Beaufort District's history in that nature, I think, is important, is that the ability to organize the resistance so that leverage of mass can be applied against the oppression was one of the reasons that the Patriots were able to continually come and fight back against British retaliation, British occupation, those types of things when they were in control in this part of the world for brief periods of time. And then beyond that, I think it's the determination of the resistance to, in Churchill's words, never ever give up, and then don't ever give up again. I think it's those two things that are important about Beaufort's role in the revolution that apply today. And I think about what's going on over in the Ukraine. And I think about that resistance, and I think about the spirit that's behind the resistance, the level of determination, and obviously the ability to organize resistance against superior resources, which is exactly what was going on here. The British had far superior resources. But again, another thing that's applicable is that it's not always just that's going to turn the tables, because if you look at the Revolutionary War, I mean, we needed the help of the French. And of the Spanish, who funded the French to give us the help they gave us, to really pull it off in the end. I think oppression is always going to be fought by determined people who will want to turn it over and make it very different than it is. And their ability to enlist the help of external support is also something that is critical. And I think, although Beaufort's external support was really from other militia units and from Continental Army units and those types of things, it was effectively able to muster those resources against the forces that sought to kind of control and dominate it, subjugate it, basically.
And that spirit is kind of still felt today when you walk into Beaufort, and you kind of feel that, or when you're reading the history of the Revolutionary War and the parts that Beaufort took place in it, you can feel it when you walk into the museums and the different types of atmospheres that we do have here in Beaufort. You can feel it definitely.
Absolutely.
But a big thank you to Rich Thank you so much for coming. We
My pleasure.
appreciate you for being on and guiding us through Beaufort's history and rich, fascinating revolutionary history. This is one of the episodes through a 7 or 8 episode series that we're going to do with the Beaufort 250. And that's going to be a great series where we kind of get the history of the Beaufort 250 Revolutionary War and everything leading up to it with different speakers as well coming onto the podcast. But these stories help us see the present through the lens of the past. Thanks for listening to the episode of the Intercoastal Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on social media at @visit_BeaufortSC on Instagram or at BeaufortSC on Facebook. Like, subscribe, and leave a review, and share this episode with anyone who loves history, culture, and the Lowcountry. Until next time. This has been another episode of the Intercoastal Podcast, hosted by Daquan Mickens and the team at Visit Beaufort Port Royal in the Sea Islands, produced by Relic.